All right, we're going to go and get the show started. My name is Stephen Hoffa. I've got a great guest here today, Glen Peterson, and welcome to the Standing Still Show, bro. We're glad to have you.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm happy to be here.
My voice was struggling through that intro, but here we are. The show goes on. So Glen Peterson is a man I really respect. We'll get that out of the way. And a man that I think a lot of everybody that's listening has a lot to learn from, and I'm really excited for that. And I'm overselling you so big right now. That way you can under-deliver later. No, I'm just kidding. But, okay, so tell everybody, just real quick, what do you do for a living? What do you do for a job?
So I work for World Relief in Southern California. I'm the office director there, where we help refugees resettle to the United States. We help immigrants with their status and with paperwork and that kind of thing. We do advocacy work in the community, education, and yeah, that's what I do for a living.
Right on, right on. So, okay, how long have you been doing that for?
I've been in this position for 6 years.
Okay. And then, what did you, was it an abrupt, okay, so ultimately it's bringing, it's totally consumed about bringing refugees in, correct?
So that's a big part of what World Relief does in the United States,
Okay.
or up until now. So, yeah, you asked what have I done? I've done a lot of community and economic development stuff in communities that are impacted by poverty,
Gotcha.
and done that with church-based groups, Christian organizations, and I've been doing that for, well, probably more than 30 years. But who's counting?
Who's counting, right? Yeah. I mean, you're only 35, so this is whole life, really. But, okay, so I'm really excited to talk to you because I know you just went to Mexico. And right now, I mean, I hate to say it, but all the rage right now is what's going on at the border with Mexico. You just got back from, what, 3-day trip?
So we were in Mexico for 3 days, and part of the reason was we've heard a lot of things that are going on in the news,
Yeah.
and people are migrating, and there's just been a lot of challenges in the news, and some of the things I've heard on the radio, on the news, is like, wow, could this possibly be true?
Yeah.
And to the extent, and should we be panicking, or just what is it like? So actually 3.5 weeks ago now, I needed to go to San Diego for some meetings, and I decided to just hop on down to Mexico and take a look around. And I met some people.
Mm-hmm.
I met some folks who were working with veterans there. I met some people with a drop-in center that were working with families coming from Central America. And then as a result of that trip, our team decided that it would be good to go down for a little more time and interview some folks who had migrated to the border and find out what their situation was, to find out what their experience was like, whether or not they have legal representation, what their hopes and dreams are in coming to the border even.
Right. And so you're planning that. You're planning those interviews, or have you already done it?
So that's what that was 3 weeks ago, and then this past week for 3 days we went down and did exactly that. So we met with some of the folks that I had met 3 weeks ago, the drop-in center.
Yeah.
They took us to a shelter for Central American migrants who were families living in tents, kind of in a warehouse, and we were able to, 12 to 14 of them we interviewed just about their situation and what their hopes and aspirations are in coming to the border.
Yeah.
Talked to some other folks, talked to some Haitian men who, frankly, are building lives there in Tijuana.
Really?
It sounds to me like they have found some success in finding work there, and they get paid more in Tijuana than they get paid in Haiti. So they're working there when they can. They're doing construction work. Tijuana is a booming town, a booming city. There's a lot of construction going on, a lot of business, tourism. It's a big city.
Interesting. So those 12 to 14 interviews that you did do on the last few days, what was, and you were talking about kind of what was your hopes of coming to the border, maybe trying to get through? What was was there a common theme, or was it scattered all, you know what I mean? I'm curious I feel like it's so much emotion, and it's all over the news about hey, we're at this border. Some people want to get in. Some people we're saying no, and some people are like, well, that's good. Some people are like, that's bad, depending on your political views. or just moral views, I guess. But what was I'm curious because I'm really excited for one because like I was telling you earlier, you're actually there talking to people, and not many people have the opportunity to do that, and so I'm really excited for your perspective. So and then their perspective as well. That's really cool. I didn't know you did all those interviews. So
yeah, there's definitely a theme going on. We talked to women and their children, but the women were from Guatemala, Honduras. And a couple were from southern Mexico, and the theme was that they were fleeing violence.
Interesting.
And so a couple of them told us that their partner or their husband had been beat up or killed by the drug cartels or the gangs that were controlling the communities.
Yeah.
So and that their son had been threatened, and they were. The gangs want the sons to join the gangs.
Gotcha.
So that's what's leading the fleeing their hometown, where they're from, their home country, and they head north with really the hope of what was interesting. People have a different perspective. Or each of the people that we talked to, that the legal requirement in coming to the border is that you have to have a credible fear of returning home in order to apply for asylum at the border.
So to get through to America, you have to have a credible way to get back from America.
No, you have to have a credible fear that you fled.
Fear. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So that's the difficulty is the Customs and Border Protection is there at the border, and when a migrant comes to the border, there's both international law and U.S. law that allows people to do that.
Gotcha.
At this point, with the current administration, there's a certain amount of resistance to allowing these interviews to happen, and that's what we're really testing. Is that what's going on?
Gotcha.
And there's a good chance that we'll be going back, and then accompanying people to the border to get those credible fear interviews, and to see what that process is like. There are some attorneys at the border, but there's a lack of legal representation
Just so overwhelmed
to make that happen because there's a lot.
Yeah.
I've gone to Tijuana many times over the years, and it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't like people were camping everywhere. In fact, one of my friends who was with us said to me, "It's not like people are camping on the street." But there were a lot of people that once we got connected, we could talk to them. So there are people there. It's not the full-on crisis that you might be led to believe.
Right. And so, okay. One thing I want to point out that I think is hilarious is when I originally texted you about doing this podcast and maybe talking about your perspective, I said, I don't really like politics or religion. I kind of try to keep that out of this podcast. And brilliantly, you texted me almost immediately back, and you said, it's all politics and religion. That's all it is. So we're doing our best. But so you go down there. So ultimately the goal is when you go back is maybe to some of these people you met and maybe some of the other ones that you haven't. And by going to the border with them, is it ultimately just, hey, here's some credibility to their story, and then also to kind of view and kind of check mark and take a snapshot of what the situation is? Is that what? Am I reading the goal right?
Yeah, that's part of it. There's a couple things that we want to do. We want to provide a very high level, high quality legal advice to the people that we talk to, and that's what we were testing when we were down there. We brought one of our attorneys and one of our fully accredited immigration reps from my office to do the interviews and to witness what's going on.
Right.
And then to watch and observe that whole process with how the U.S. Border Patrol or the Customs and Border Protection, how well they comply with the current laws.
Right.
That's one of the things that we want to observe. And it's U.S. law. It's the Immigration Nationalization Act of 1965, paragraph 208. And
you've looked at it before.
It allows people to approach the border and ask for asylum.
Interesting.
And they can do it at the border. They can do it at sea. They can do it at an airport. They can come in on a tourist visa and apply anytime within a year.
Right.
So it's wide open for people to apply for asylum.
Gotcha. So you naturally, because for it to get to your desk, I assume it's a lot of I don't want to say severe cases, but it's a lot of, like you said, fear of violence, fear of whether it be from Mexico or from the Mexican border coming up north, or you've done a lot of Middle Eastern stuff like that, haven't
So
you?
a lot of our refugees come from the Middle East, or in the recent past. They've come from Afghanistan and Iraq. Those are special immigrant visa holders who are people who come through the refugee system because they assisted the U.S. military in our war efforts in those countries. And because of that, they're given special immigrant visas, and they're able to come through the refugee program.
Interesting.
Others are being displaced by wars and things that are going on in their country, and people are being displaced because of the fear of violence and fear of persecution because of their race, their ethnic origin, their political views, their religion, or their social group that they're in. So what was really clear to me when I went down 3 weeks ago, the people that I talked to and that I saw, these are refugees. These are the same. It's the same legal definition to be a refugee as it is to be an asylum seeker. And those were the people who we were talking to and doing those interviews. The only difference is the United Nations isn't parked there doing interviews to use the State Department as a process to do refugee resettlement. In this case, they're arriving right at our border, so they're eclipsing part of that process.
Right. Where did you go? I feel like the picture that's painted by, I feel like a lot of people, especially my age, I'm 25, so a lot of the younger crowd, and I think a lot of on different just news outlets, is it's like a riot at the border. And so the picture that what I want to see is when you went down there, how hard was it to find? Did you already have? Did you have contacts upon going down there to look for these asylum seekers, or where did you? You know what I mean? What was that process look like? Was it just like, all right, let's go find some people, or did you already have contacts and specific people of like, okay, we're going down to talk to them? You knew it ahead of time, or was it totally a shot in the dark? Hey, let's go down there. We're gonna find some people that really need it.
We absolutely had some connections. I reached out to some people that worked down at the border.
Gotcha. Okay.
And through those connections, they directed me to the drop-in center where a lot of the refugees arrive and ask for services because their clothes are worn out and they need food and they need a place to stay. Through that organization, we were given access to the shelter where there were probably 50, 60, 70 tents set up indoors in this warehouse where people were staying, families with children. So it's through connections that I had. I reached out to. The border looks the same as it always has in terms of, there's a lot of people there. If you went down there, you could probably find people to talk to who are interested in moving to the United States.
Right.
Some will have that opportunity, others won't.
And your job is not only to help people get in, but really help people that really need it, huh? Yeah, is that part of your job? Is kind of weeding out? Are they credible? You know what I mean? Things like that.
I found that as we talk to different peoples in different groups, I mentioned that I talked to some Haitian men who were there. Their idea of moving to the United States was kind of vague and in their minds, but really what they were doing are building lives there. They're working on getting work permits to work in Mexico. They're working on finding construction jobs in the economy that's supporting. There's a lot of cranes up in the air, buildings that are being built.
Really?
And so there were jobs for them. They like to explain to me that they were really good workers and they would work cheaper than the Mexicans, and they're really hard workers, which is kind of like the Mexicans who come here. They tell me that, oh, yeah, we're the really hard workers, unlike those Americans. Those are soft. It was interesting. I've heard this story before. So the migrants who are arriving there are actually helping build the economy because there's more people there. We actually ate at a Haitian restaurant or a Haitian lunch spot, lonchera, which is just it's a place where workers come, and all they had was rice and fried chicken.
Hey, who's arguing?
That was the only thing, and they had some sauce to put on it. And we ate there with the workers. It was kind of a fun experience.
Interesting.
And they speaking French and Creole, and my team had English and Spanish, and these guys had actually, some of them had gone to Spanish classes, so we were listening to Spanish with a French accent, and they were listening to my horrible English accented Spanish.
How, I mean, you've got, I mean, obviously it's anything you do more than once, you become a little bit jaded, but you've got a great sense of just the world that we live in, I think. I mean, granted, you've seen a lot of the negative in the world from people fleeing, I would imagine. But I think you've also seen some of the fantastic positives that we have to offer. Not in a sense of like, hey, we have a lot to offer in America, but I'm just saying in like, let's leave country names out of this. Just humanity, people needing help from where they're at, and you doing the best you can to bring them into a spot and into a culture that they can thrive in. How has that been for you as far as staying passionate, throughout the years? Is it easy because you can see, I bet you the payoff is really great when you do bring a family in and you really get to help them and you see that, I mean, they're essentially all in on their, especially if they're coming from the Middle East, even from, through the Mexican border, or however south that they are. It's essentially an all in on their life. Hey, I want to start over with my family, whether it be a mother and this is for my child. You can come up with whatever crazy story that we've all heard that pulls on the heartstrings. But I would imagine, as hard work as it is, how has it been easy keeping that passion going because you've had those what a cool moment,
I think the thing that drives me is the resilience and the vigor that comes from the refugees that we work with. While they have faced things that seem absolutely impossible, they've had to flee their homeland. I've talked to school teachers who had to leave work, called their family, said, meet me at such and such a place. We're headed out, and left their country.
Like just that day. Made the decision.
Because somebody in their family got killed because of their political beliefs or their religion or their ethnicity.
Yeah.
And they had to leave with whatever they were wearing. Ended up traveling a road that was really long, ended up in another country as a displaced person, found the United Nations to help them apply for refugee status. Mm-hmm. And through this whole thing, which takes years,
right,
end up coming to the United States. And by the way, a very small percentage of people who are in this displaced position are ever allowed to come to the United States through the State Department.
Interesting.
So it's not a huge percentage at all. It's like less than 1% of people who are actually allowed to migrate to the U.S. Other countries like Sweden and England and Germany, Australia, and Japan and Iceland also receive refugees.
Right.
Until this last year, the United States received more refugees than the other countries. This past year, Canada eclipsed us.
It's really bottlenecked this last year.
So things really slowed down.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Even though we're currently in the biggest refugee crisis since the end of World War II. So the war that caused the displacement in 1944 displaced all kinds of people as political lines were being drawn in Europe.
Right.
People were being displaced from the Middle East and North Africa. That was considered the worst refugee crisis of all time until about 2015 because of the wars in the Middle East and the things that were happening there.
Everybody's just got to branch out. There's so much negativity
so like
going on.
65 million people displaced from their homes. So that includes internally displaced people, people who had to flee but stayed in their own country, people who fled to another country. That's about 25 million, 23 million maybe. And then it's recently like 80,000 people came to the United States in like 2014.
Okay. What excuse me, what is, I mean, there's a lot of, when you're dealing with something, especially with that kind of magnitude, and you're trying to create rules that's going to be okay and run smoothly for all of them, it's not, right? It's got to be, I'm assuming, a nightmare to have. I mean, obviously, it's no transition for that anybody wants to go through as a refugee. They're obviously doing it because of such desperate times. So
nobody wants to become a refugee.
Right.
Everybody that I've talked to would have much preferred to stay home.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got to that second country after being displaced, what they really wanted was things to settle down in their home, and they wanted to go back. That was their real plan.
Mm-hmm.
It was eventually they understood that they're not going to be able to return, and it's not suitable to stay where they are.
Right.
And largely because countries like Lebanon's population has doubled
Interesting.
in the past, let's say, 10 years because of refugee displacement, leaving
Just everybody fleeing to that
Syria
country.
especially, but other Middle Eastern countries ending up in Lebanon. That's where some of the biggest crisis is. There's refugee camps there. Other people make it north to Turkey, and they live in the general population, but at the same time they're working on their refugee status.
Okay. What do you think has been the most frustrating as far as law-wise? Because I would feel like time and paperwork is the name of the game with that, and knowing which phone number to call and who to call and which contacts you have. Sometimes I would assume that it's like, hey, this person is definitely credible to come. They've done everything that they need to be doing, and and then it's like, oh, that the communication is a problem. What is the most frustrating thing for you, whether it be just the name of the game of bringing refugees in that tall order that it is in itself, or just because everybody knows that the laws aren't perfect in this country. They're not perfect in any country. You know what I mean? What is the biggest hole in our game right now, do you think?
Well, it's really important to state and to understand that the refugee process is a legal process of migration.
Right.
Nobody comes in as a refugee as an extra legal situation.
Right.
It's a legal process, and it's very well regulated. All the refugees are very well vetted before they come in. But the frustrating thing in the past year and a half has been the administration and their rhetoric. The rhetoric has been such that says, oh, refugees are probably terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that repeated over and over again.
Right.
And we've heard people believe it. In 2016, before the election, I was getting phone calls in my office. Are you the people who's bringing in terrorists to the United States?
Just hate calls, just negativity.
Yeah. So we actually had a protocol when we got that phone call. What do we do? I'd staff people crying about it. So we'd have to ask, are you threatening us? Are you threatening a refugee? Do you know a refugee?
Really?
That kind of thing. So that was really important. But here's the fact of the matter. The refugees come in on a special act of Congress signed into law in 1980. 3.2 million people have come into the United States as refugees since then.
Yeah.
How many terrorists do you think came in through that in order to attack the United States?
Right. It's
zero.
Right.
Not one single refugee came in with the intent of becoming a terrorist. Now, I didn't say that zero were, criminals. There have been, but it's interesting. Compared to the general population, fewer refugees are actually criminals.
Right.
Because these are the energetic ones. These are the people with motivation and the people who wanted to do it right. Some of them maybe were radicalized once they got here by other people. But of that 3.2 million, zero were terrorists when they came through the process. So that's what's really frustrating is you hear repeated over and over again in certain news media channels and from the administration itself that we're facing a terrorist situation with the refugee program. Simply not true.
Right. Interesting. Well, so those people usually just get in somehow illegally then. I'm not calling you.
What people?
Any kind of.
The refugees all came through a legal process.
Right.
They all arrived at a port of entry. They had the paperwork.
Right. So why do they use the choice of calling them refugees when there is some kind of terrorist attack and they say, oh, there's another refugee? What? Well, I guess they are a refugee in a sense.
So refugees, the term, not everybody uses this, but when I say the word refugees, I'm speaking to a specific legal process that they came into the country.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So it's an overused term, I would say. Then
sometimes people are referring to refugees more generally, and they might include asylum seekers or asylees.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important distinction legally, but the same legal categories apply to an asylum seeker as to a refugee. You have to have a credible fear of persecution or harm in your country of origin because of your race, your ethnic origin, your political beliefs, your religion, or a special social group. So those are the 5 things that you have to be fleeing for.
Okay.
Just having a war, being hungry, being unemployed, none of those qualify you as a refugee.
Right.
Now there are categories of people who come to the United States, and some of the people who come to our southern border are what we loosely could call an economic refugee.
Okay.
So an economic refugee are those categories of there's no jobs, and the globalization has eliminated my job, so I'm headed north because of I'm looking for work. I need to support my family. My family is literally starving. I need to do something. So here I am arriving at the border. So some people come outside of a legal process.
Right.
So that's a different kind of individual coming to the United States. So here's an interesting thing about that.
Mm-hmm.
So in Orange County, where my office is, I know some statistics here. There's out of 3 million people, there's 300,000 immigrants. And some percentage of that, I'm not going to remember all of the details of these statistics, there are a certain number of undocumented or out-of-status immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them came from Vietnam or China or Korea on a tourist visa or a student visa, and after a period of time living here decided to make a go at living here and working here and raising a family here. So outside of the legal system just overstayed their visa.
Gotcha.
Some from Latin America came to that border and were able to come through the border and came into the United States without inspection, is what we call it. So the initials of that is IWI. So we have IWI immigrants entered without inspection, and they're in the most difficult situation because it's much harder to adjust your status then. But if you came with inspection through the process and overstayed your visa, there is a certain chance that you could adjust status because of your family situation. You might have U.S. citizen children. You might have gotten married.
Right.
And you can do certain things to adjust status. So a lot of the legal work we do in our office is interviewing people to find out what legal remedies they might have.
Gotcha.
Now, here's the interesting thing that I was getting to when I first started this long paragraph. Is that we participated in an academic study. A professor from UCSD engaged us to test, how many undocumented or unauthorized migrants live in Orange County who would qualify for a remedy, an immigration remedy, immigration relief, if they knew what it was and had legal representation in order to do that. So for a long time, when I spoke to groups, I was saying that there's 10 to 12% who could adjust status or get a legal remedy if they knew about World Relief and they knew about our programs with our high-quality, low-cost or no-cost immigration services.
Right. Yeah.
But this study came back, and I hope he publishes this, but the initial results that he presented to our group after we interviewed 2,500 out-of-status individuals in Orange County is that it's 20.9%.
Of those that are legally eligible, but
they're
just don't
eligible for a legal remedy, but they don't know what it is.
Gotcha.
So as we did those 25 interviews, we found, oh, you've got a legal remedy. You go to this line right now because we're going to process you with that. And statistically, it's 20.9% of the. So if that extension is true in all of Orange County, there's something like 30,000 people who would benefit.
Yeah, 1 in 5.
If they knew about our office and we could actually help them. Interesting.
It's so. This is why I like having people like you on, Glenn. This is. I love how he smirks. It's like okay, here it comes. I've been holstering this for a while. No, but here's why I like having you on, because it's so easy. Obviously, we're from the LA area. It's so easy to sit on the 10 freeway, coming home from work, and just going, they're bringing more people in, because you're just sitting there forever. It's so easy to be that negative, and then you have the news media that is just promoting anger and promoting whichever side you're on, and it's to have somebody like you. I'm going to tell a story pretty soon here because here's the thing I like about you is you don't clock out. I met you through my church. I actually lived in your house for like 5 months, which I'm going to tell a story about that pretty soon here. But you're not one of those guys that goes in front of the camera and helps all these refugees and says, we need more love in the world. These people need love. We can help them. And then you clock out and you go, oh, geez, that was terrible. You know what I mean? Or you clock out and you go, okay, I don't care about that. It consumes you, I think, because I think you're just a good dude, for one. When I was 20, I had to be out by my 21st birthday, and it was kind of a couple months before, and it was really cracking down. I was making $10 an hour, which is not that much, and especially in LA, that is nothing. So I didn't know how to find a place. I think I'd maybe talk to you. We had a mutual friend that I knew, Sean Starnes, that we knew. He was moving. You guys rent out the top half of your house. So my buddy was moving in with you with another friend that I did not know. And I said, hey, man, can I tag along? Like, I don't really know what's going on, if I'm going to have a place to live. Like, I kind of, I'm really up against the fence here. I'm looking to put my egg in your basket, Sean.
So you're describing yourself as a refugee to me here. So.
Yeah.
Can I move into your house? I'm a refugee.
No, but I'm fear for my life. But no, I remember, going up to you, not only because I was interested about the opportunity and kind of seeing if this was a valid opportunity, but hey, I need to put myself, almost like a salesman, I need to put myself out there and see if I can score this place to live, because I need to make it happen. And I remember it was like 5 minutes here, like just schmoozing chit chat after church. You know what I mean? Some 5 minutes here, and then I'd see your wife, Cindy, and you, and another 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes altogether. And I remember it came back, and Sean was telling me, he's like, they don't really want 3 people living up there. There's between parking, it's all street parking, and it's not really fair to the neighbors, and it's just not really fair. And I just went, oh, dude, that's a bummer, because I really put all my eggs in that one basket. You know what I mean? And like, it was like a month out. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know what to do. And then like a week later, Sean came up to me, and your wife, Cindy, came up to me, and she said, we were really moved. Sean, kind of behind the scenes, was working some magic, and kind of told him the situation, because I didn't want to come up to you and say, hey, man, I'm getting kicked out of my parents' house. Don't ask why, bro. But can I live in your pat? And, I wanted to paint a good picture. And Sean basically painted the picture of what was going on. And Cindy, your wife, told me, and I'll never forget these words, that she was kind of him and Han, we don't really have the room. It's going to be really tight. Do you really want a third person up there? He really needs a place, but do you really want to do it? And she told me that you said, well, you know what? Love isn't always comfortable. And then you guys allowed me to live there. And I tell you what, whether you're religious or not, I felt God more in that moment than I had since I can remember. I felt the love through you, through your wife, through everything. And once I moved into your place, I got the job that I got now in like a month. Everything just started kicking off. I was only there for 5 months, and then I moved into the place I'm in now. But it was exactly because I think you guys like to rent out that place for kind of people in transition and people that need it. It was perfect timing. Look at the relationship that I have with you now. I always respect it, and I've always wanted to say thank you for that. So 5 minutes here and there, maybe 3 times, 20 minutes altogether, maybe, of just schmoozing, talking after church. And you let me live with you when you had no chance to let me live with you. And it was very interesting, because 3 people was definitely too many people up there. But
I'm glad to hear that was a good experience. And
but what I'm saying,
if I said that love is not always comfortable, then I agree with that. That was really good.
Yeah, it was. Dude, it was a really powerful moment for me for obvious reasons. But my point of that story is the fact that you don't check out from your job and just go home. You're a person that lives that kind of passion, and I think it definitely shows in my life for sure. And I've been putting up flyers and telling everybody I know about that forever. But no, I'm just kidding. I haven't put any flyers up. But so, okay. With that being said, the point of that story was you're not a guy, because a lot of people are listening to you, and it's so easy to, people consume themselves with political views and things like that. You're already labeled, 5 minutes in, oh, you're whatever they think you are. You have that label of you're on this side and you're this person. You're bringing people in, blah, blah, blah. You're bringing in Mexicans. Oh, my gosh, you're bringing in whatever. You know what I'm saying? And people have already labeled me. I'm trying to keep this as neutral as possible. But you're clearly a person, like I said, that isn't doing this for a job. It's a passion for what is right and to ultimately help people out, which is very powerful. So when people come in and they've got, it's been years, it's been this whole problem. That was my phone, sorry. But it's been this whole problem. They've gone from probably 1 or 2 countries already, and it's been a struggle for years. They finally get clearance. It's totally legal. They come here. They're here in your office. Is that how it works? They literally go to your office?
So through the refugee process, there's a couple things I want to say, but the refugee process is such that if someone qualifies to be a refugee through the United Nations, then they have the opportunity to be vetted and reviewed by various countries who are receiving countries. If the United States accepts someone as a refugee, they go through a process through the International Office of Migration, who helps with the logistics of travel. And so the United Nations passes them to the State Department, passes them to IOM, which passes them to us. And our work begins several months before they arrive. We take a look at their biographical information. We look at why they want to come to Southern California. We start thinking about housing, job opportunities, education opportunities, education for children, and those kinds of things. And then once all of that is in process, the Office of Migration will then transport them, and we'll pick them up at the airport.
Gotcha.
And we'll be the first people, and our volunteers, typically church volunteers, will arrive at the airport to pick them up, bring them to the first place they're going to live, which typically is a temporary place. We help them find an apartment. We help them find jobs. We help make sure they get into language school, all of the things that they need. Make sure their kids get vaccinations. Make sure that they're
a good jumping
in good
off
health.
point.
So all of these things over 90 days, and then there's an 8-month thing, and then we're really looking at immigrant integration. I would resist a little bit the idea that we're bringing people in as like an active thing. I would say that because of the world the way it is right now, people migrate all over the place for all kinds of reasons. And some of those reasons are refugee reasons, and we help with that process. It's not like we go out and find people and like bring them in. There's a lot of push and there's a lot of pull that brings people to the United States. And we're just a small piece of that whole thing.
Of the large puzzle.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest thing that you've seen? Obviously, with the refugee, and I mean, a lot of us can't even comprehend of what they've been through, like you said earlier. They come in with that kind of motivation behind them and perspective and everything like that. I'm sure appreciation is probably huge. What do you think is like the biggest thing that they just like right away? Man, they really bring this to America. They really bring this energy. What do you think that is? You know, is it just a perspective? Is it because, like you said, a lot of the time, you know, they need that jumping off point, whether it be living and stuff like that you guys help provide, and language and things like that. But they must be offering something and nobody can go through that kind of perspective and that kind of motivation and not just come ready for something. You know what I mean?
Perspective is a good word. I think entrepreneurship is a good word. I mean, there's a much larger percentage of refugees and immigrants who start businesses than native-born people. They're the people with the gumption and the ideas and the things that go on. Right. The other thing that I think of when what do they bring? We had an Afghan refugee who came through the special immigrant visa process. He worked as a medic. He was a trained doctor in Afghanistan, worked for the U.S. Military there, and actually performed an emergency appendectomy on a U.S. soldier, saved the kid's life over there. When he arrived here, he couldn't practice medicine because he doesn't have a doctor's license to practice here. His first job is working at a T-shirt factory. Wow. The silk screening and putting T-shirts together.
Slightly overqualified.
Bending over a table doing this stuff. It's like and then he shows up at our office a couple months later with this. This is not unusual. Refugees bring us lunch.
Really?
They cook up this great meal for us, and they come in and plop it down on our break table, and we're all like so humbled that they're
right.
And here's a doctor working in a T-shirt factory and showing his gratitude to us. I mean, that just illustrates to me what some of these people bring.
Right.
Recently, one of my staff told me that this guy is now working in a program where he's trying to get back into the medical field. He's taking some classes. He's working probably at like a certified nursing assistant position right now, but at least is in the medical field.
Yeah, get his foot in the door.
And he's taking classes and trying to get certified. So, but bringing the energy and the desire and the drive to take care of your family like that, it's a beautiful thing.
I bet. Well, I'll tell you what. This has been a great podcast. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Any kind of message you want to bring before we finish it?
Well, let's get back to this topic of love. I really, you said, no religion, no politics. So we've come in pretty strong with politics. Let's come in with the religion. I really think my religion teaches me that I'm supposed to love my neighbor.
Yeah.
And even people confronted Jesus on this and said, "What? Who's my neighbor? Don't tell me I gotta love all of my neighbors."
Yeah.
I mean, the neighbor that's like me, that's great. But Jesus even goes further than that. He says, if you don't think they're your neighbor, love your enemy. The whole idea that to be a Christian today means to love your enemy, love your neighbor, and love people. And I think that's what the world needs more of, and I think that's going to transform the way we are. I believe that I've been transformed because I've been loved by immigrants. I've been included as family. I've been given hospitality in ways that it's just hard to believe.
Yeah. Interesting. What made you what drew you immediately? You said you've been doing this for about 30 years. What drew you to this immediately? Did you already have a passion for this, or did you kind of just stumble into this and then you found out you loved it?
Somewhere the passion developed. I knew I wanted to do some kind of church work. I went to seminary, graduate school for pastors, graduated from seminary. I had moved into an inner city neighborhood and was working with economic development. We did housing cooperative. We did food cooperative. We were doing things that helped build the community for poor people. We were talking about racial reconciliation and development, economic development. And through that, I found out as the church gets involved, communities become better, and as Christians and people of goodwill are in proximity to others and to serve and to become friends, that's what transforms neighborhoods and communities.
Definitely.
And that's what my passion is.
Definitely. Just spread that good, spread that love, that good vibes, and that's kind of the short way to put it. Spread those good vibes, bro. But I totally get what you're saying. Look, you've changed my life. I'm hoping with this podcast you can help change others. I think you've done a lot. Maybe not quite as much as me, Glenn, but you've done a lot in your life. I'm just kidding. No, you're a good guy, and I'm really glad to have you on. I really was excited and really intimidated because obviously you're a smart man. You've done a lot. I don't watch the news. I don't stick my head in the sand, but it's so easy to get enraged and consumed by what you don't like about politics and things like that. So I kind of tend to sheer away from it. But I'm really glad to have you on. I definitely learned a lot and I needed that perspective. I think I needed, what's really going on and what's happening. So I hope everybody loved it too.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, definitely.
I was intimidated too.
Hey, man.
Microphone and cameras, those are scary things.
I know. Well, hey, I appreciate it. We're out of here, everybody. Thank you so much, Glenn.